Sukuna, an underrated villain when it comes to the big shonen villains. Is Sukuna in the conversation with Madara, Blackbeard, Riza, or even Meruem if you want to count him as a villain as well? Is he on par with these guys? Is he even the best villain in his own series, Jujutsu Kaisen? In terms of power and strength, there is no denying it. He is the only one that can go toe-to-toe with Gojo. He didn't need to conjure up a plan to imprison Gojo. If anything, as soon as Gojo got released in chapter 221, Sukuna jumped at Gojo straight away, which shows to us at least that not only can he be as formidable a foe towards Gojo, but he also doesn't have that fear against Gojo, which already makes him stand out against the other villains in this series. I think in terms of him being overrated as a character, it's probably due to the constant comparisons between himself and Gojo. I even released a video myself describing the anticipation of this monster matchup between Gojo and Sukuna. If you haven't already, please do go and check that video out. Still with Sukuna, before he took over Megumi's body in chapter 212, us as a fan base always talked about what if full-powered Sukuna faced off against Gojo at full power? Who would win between these two monsters? I can certainly say for myself that most of the time when I talk about Jujutsu Kaisen with my friends in a casual conversation, the big talking point before chapter 212 would be that very question: full power Sukuna versus full power Gojo. Who wins? It's the easiest and it's almost the go-to conversation to have when it comes to Jujutsu Kaisen. The characters of Sukuna and Gojo have been turned into a debate, especially Sukuna. Instead of looking deep into what a good villain Sukuna is, how he is such an opportunist within the story, Sukuna reminds me of Blackbeard from One Piece, because Blackbeard himself is also an opportunist. Whatever chance he gets, he will take, such as defeating Ace and taking him to the world government, which allowed Blackbeard to be a warlord of the world government, thus allowed him to have special access to government-only places such as Impel Down, which he wanted to do as he wanted all the worst criminals locked up in Impel Down to be a part of his crew. Now, this may sound like a big elaborate plan, but it all spawned from the opportunity that was risen with Ace being defeated and vulnerable to be captured in the first place. Blackbeard knew what he wanted to do, but just getting along with the plan would have been difficult to do and would have taken him time to do so. But he took this opportunity with Ace and is now currently Luffy's biggest rival in terms of who will be the Pirate King. Sukuna did something similar as well. Remember way back early in the story, probably around episode 3, after Gojo and Sukuna had their brief encounter, Sukuna declares war on Gojo and says that Gojo will be the first person that he kills, with Gojo replying that it's an honor to be targeted by the great Sukuna. Sukuna set out his plan from the get-go. He wants to kill Gojo, but how is he going to get there? Well, he discovered that Megumi uses Shikigamis back in episode 5. From then on, he has stated that Megumi would be useful in the future. Even the fight between Sukuna and Megumi, it was Sukuna himself who was training with Megumi in their fight, asking him to put more cursed energy into his attacks, and was just telling him to keep coming at him. In chapter 117, Gojo revealed to Megumi that a 6 Eyes user with the limitless technique from the head of the Gojo family, as well as the head of the Zenin family who possessed the 10 Shadow technique, both ended up killing each other, but he couldn't clarify what time period this was from. But considering Sukuna was also from the Heian period, which was known as the golden age of Jujutsu, Sukuna must have had an idea that in order to beat Gojo, the 10 Shadows technique would be useful against him. And look what happens only a couple episodes after he declares that Gojo will be the first person that he kills. Megumi, who happens to be a 10 Shadow technique user, stumbles upon Sukuna, which now fast-forwarded Sukuna's plan into killing Gojo. All Sukuna has to do is make sure Megumi doesn't die, which Sukuna himself does go out of his way in order to make sure he doesn't. Such as when Mahoraga was released in the Shibuya Incident arc, and Sukuna made sure Megumi was safe as he ended up killing the unbeatable Mahoraga in chapter 119. Fast forward to chapter 212 and Sukuna has taken over Megumi's body and was practicing using his Shikigamis against Yorozu between chapters 217 and 219, with him also summoning Mahoraga. And now, as of this recording, Sukuna is fighting off against Gojo currently in the story. So for me, Sukuna already had a goal in mind in killing Gojo. Gojo then declaring his family's weakness against the 10 Shadow users in a flashback after Sukuna wanting to use Megumi for his plans, indicating that Sukuna may have already known that the 10 Shadows technique can beat Gojo. And now Sukuna has possessed Megumi's body in order to reach his goal in killing Gojo. Sukuna with all 20 fingers probably would have given Gojo a tough fight, but to have the 10 Shadow techniques as a trump card is also massive. But this all ties back to Sukuna being an opportunist. He saw the true potential of Megumi and pounced on that situation, knowing that Megumi will be the key into defeating Gojo. Just like how Blackbeard saw the opportunity in capturing Ace and how that would hugely benefit his crew into having really strong subordinates being part of his crew, cementing his status as a Yonko of the Sea. Everyone loves talking about how great a villain Blackbeard is, but Sukuna, as I just demonstrated, has all those characteristics as well. He planned what his goal was as soon as the audience met his character. He planned how to get to his goal, and when an opportunity has risen, he took it, which allowed him to speed up the process. Even Kenjaku had to wait 1,000 years in order to finally make use of his plan. Sukuna finally returns after 1,000 years and quickly goes about his plan, and unlike Kenjaku, he is actually on par with Gojo in terms of strength. So not only is he a planner and an opportunist, he also has the strength to back him up. Can you see Kenjaku going 1v1 against Gojo? No, I didn't think so. Only Sukuna can. But what I'm trying to say is that he didn't just fall into that power by accident. He knew how to reach his full power and potential as well. Sukuna is just as much of a planner as Kenjaku is. Look at his plan in killing Yorozu. Yorozu was in possession of Megumi's sister, but Sukuna decided to only fight Yorozu with Megumi's techniques, which will further plummet Megumi into despair, as it's his techniques that ended up killing his sister. So not only does Sukuna bury Megumi into darkness, he is also practicing the Ten Shadows techniques with the use of the Shikigamis as practice before his big main event fight against Gojo. So this quick plan of his was a win-win scenario for Sukuna, and I think that's such an underrated aspect of his character as a villain. We all praise Kenjaku how good of a villain he is because of how he plans ahead. Well, Sukuna plans for the minute details as well as having a long-term goal. So Sukuna should also be in the conversation in terms of intellect as well. But because of the Gojo vs Sukuna debate, I feel this part of Sukuna's character gets lost within the fandom, as we rather have Sukuna as a barometer to power scale other characters rather than see and notice what a great planner and schemer of a villain Sukuna is. Another aspect of Sukuna being an underrated villain is that he is actually evil. I know I may sound weird saying how Sukuna, who is meant to be evil, is good at being evil, but how many times have you seen that old trope where the character within wasn't really evil and it was actually his friend all this time? We saw it in Naruto with Yu-Gi-Oh! Originally Atem was an actual evil villain back in Yu-Gi-Oh! Season 0. The stuff he was doing back in that season was definitely evil villain-like. Even in movies, remember in the Sam Raimi Spider-Man films, well, more specifically Spider-Man 2, where Dr. Octopus's arms were the ones making him evil, but then became good in the end. I know that's a little bit of a stretch, but we have seen it so many times throughout pop culture, how the character within becomes friends with his host and turns out to be the good guy in the end. I just love the fact that Sukuna never turned babyface and still kept being evil. Not once did he have a friendship moment with Yuji. The closest thing to it is probably both them trying to agree on a binding vow, which Sukuna still ends up ripping Yuji's face off. Sukuna is such a great antagonist towards Yuji. He knows he can't physically hurt him. He knows that, but he also knows Yuji's psyche. He knows how much Yuji wants to save people, considering he has been trapped inside of Yuji's body. So you would think he knows how Yuji's mind operates. And in chapter 120, Sukuna unleashes the ultimate blow to Yuji by revealing the damage he has done to the residents in Shibuya. Literally at the beginning of the chapter, saying, "Hey brat, take a good look." He is so evil and cruel to Yuji, which goes against the demon within trope so nicely. Even when he took over Megumi's body, he wants to make sure that he breaks Megumi's mind as well, just like how he did to Yuji in killing Megumi's sister. Sukuna doesn't want to just hurt people. He wants to make sure that the people he is hurting truly suffer psychologically as well as physically. Both Megumi and Yuji fell victim towards his psychological attacks. Look at Yuji. He has never been the same since Shibuya. He still carries that burden of the thought that it was him who killed all those people in Shibuya when he admitted to Higuruma. And all throughout the Culling Games, Megumi's main priority was his sister. And what does Sukuna do? He kills his sister with Megumi's own body and powers. The guy just loves tormenting people and is brilliantly evil. Look at One Piece, and again, look at Blackbeard, who is the big bad villain and is one of the One Piece community's favorite villains. How often do you see Blackbeard do genuinely evil things? Hell, I'll even use another pirate from that series, Captain Kidd. He was meant to be known as a murderer and a pirate that destroys innocent civilians' home islands and goes on a rampage and kills. Basically being a proper pirate. But again, your told that he did all these things, but you're never shown it. Blackbeard and Captain Kidd, two evil pirates, but we hardly see them doing genuinely evil things. Don't get me wrong, I love these two characters, but when you compare them to Sukuna, especially Blackbeard, I feel Sukuna is not only as good as a planner like Blackbeard in his own story, but I feel he's more evil than Blackbeard. In chapter 112, Sukuna was ripping people's heads off for fun. He killed Geto's two assistants and declared that he will kill every human being in Shibuya. Sukuna was pure evil in this chapter, and even Jogo, who is also a special grade curse, comments how Sukuna's power is overwhelmingly evil compared to Gojo's. I can't emphasize this enough, guys. We have to see evil characters like Sukuna be actual evil characters. The one thing I will use against Sukuna as a villain is that he is too likable and charismatic that you can't help but root for him. He's one of those characters that is too good as a villain and you end up liking him as a result. But because most of the fanbase likes Sukuna, it is that much more important to make sure that we see Sukuna being despicably evil. Because the risk you have with Sukuna being so charismatic is that fear factor of the villain will disappear. The point of a villain is for us, the audience, to fear him whenever he encounters our main group of heroes. Thanos in Infinity War is the perfect example. When he arrived on Earth and was looking for the Time Stone, everyone felt that dread, that fear of seeing our heroes being completely destroyed by the main villain. That's what makes a great villain. If you end up liking the villain, then is he really a great villain? However, with Sukuna, we do see him do horrible acts, as I mentioned earlier, in the way he breaks both Yuji and Megumi, and he pretty much is a mass murderer. He even killed his own love interest, so in terms of evil, Sukuna has that pretty much locked in. And in all honesty, if it wasn't for Gojo, or better yet, if Sukuna does end up killing Gojo as he planned, that same feeling of dread that we get from villains like Thanos, we will 100% feel that same feeling with Sukuna. And that's what makes a great villain, and in my opinion, Sukuna is severely underrated as a villain. I think him potentially being too likable may have a factor, but I don't think it comes down to that. I think it just boils down to the Gojo versus Sukuna debate. Hell, Gojo's character is sometimes overlooked because of this debate as well. So it's just not one way. It's affecting both of these characters in my opinion. Anyway, I want to now go to you guys. What do you think? Do you think Sukuna is an underrated villain compared to his shonen counterparts? Or do you think he's an overrated villain? Let me know in the comments down below. And of course, don't forget to subscribe to the Shaman Tribe.